All right, here with John, guitarist from Order of Ennead. Now, John, how'd you hook up with the band? And can you talk a little bit about the new disc?
Sure. I started out with the band because I grew up in Tampa, and I met Scott, our bass player, through my guitar teacher at the time, who was Ralph Santala, and he was playing in DSI, and we went to Giganto together, and then that's when Ralph introduced me, and Scott told me he had this black metal project called Council of the Fallen at the time, is what they were called, and they asked me to audition. And before I even played any shows or did any rehearsals with them, the band it kind of disbanded for a while. And after my first year at NYU, he called me again. He said, "Well, this time we changed our name and we got a record deal, and the offer still stands if you want to audition." I got pretty excited. I'm like, "Yeah, of course I'll do it." So I did some demos for them, did some solos, and they liked it a lot. And that's how I joined the band. And just like I said, we recorded 2 discs so far. And on the second one, I think it's a lot more cohesive than on the first one because songs were kind of all written around the same time. So there's sort of like a very like thematic mindset behind it. It's not a concept album, but the lyrical content is all very similar, and there's a natural progression throughout the album that's kind of like a storyline. So it's pretty cool. And as far as for me personally on the album, I think it was I think I grew a lot musically since then because I did a bunch of tours and I got to know the guys better. And when I recorded my parts for the first album, basically it was like 1 or 2 weeks before we went to the studio. I had to learn these songs. I didn't really get too much of a feel for them because I do it really quickly, do it right away. So I was mostly just improvising in the studio, like on the spot, like what should go here, what should go here, and it was a little hectic, and it was my first time in the studio doing anything. So I was really inexperienced, a little bit nervous, and I think it turned out pretty good as far as what I was expecting. But on the second one, I had more time to sit with the songs. I was very involved in the demoing process, and I actually wrote out a lot of themes that I improvised on. Took a lot of time with it. And it was it was a lot more cohesive. Like I said, there's a lot more narrative in the playing instead of just random improvisation. So I like it a lot, and I think it's equally as good as the first one, but just very different. And because it's still fresh to us, right now I'm leaning more towards that one than the first one.
Sure. Now, I'll tell you one of the things that caught my eye. What was it like to take guitar lessons from Ralph?
It was quite the learning experience. He never really taught me any licks or anything like that. He was just sort of showing me guitar players that he really liked, that he studied from, and would just sort of show me how to analyze guitar playing, to say like, okay, you see here how he's bending and holding that note, because it lends itself to this, and yada yada yada. Here he's using this scale to get this effect, stuff like that, and just sort of getting me more into an artistic mindset rather than just a physical mindset. Because obviously, for a lot of guitar players, will spend hours in their bedroom just running up and down scales, which is also very important. Technique is, I would say, it's just as important as harmony, though, and ear training. Because if you just run up and down scales and stuff like that, you're never gonna be musical because you're never gonna hear it. You're just gonna go with muscle memory. That'll be your first impulse rather than going by what you're hearing.
Right.
So that's definitely a very valuable lesson he taught me.
Now, who are some of your favorite guitar players? And really just curious, what do you play?
My favorite guitar player is obviously my first big inspiration was Randy Rhoads. That was definitely the first eye-opener. My first guitar teacher showed me Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman and Tribute, and those were the first metal albums really that I listened to. Besides like other stuff at the time I was listening to when I was like 13 or 14, it was like Slipknot and stuff like that. And so that really took me in a different direction, guitar playing wise. And then I started getting into Yngwie Malmsteen. That was actually the first show I saw. Was him with Steve Vai and Joe Satriani doing the G3.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that was cool. And actually later I met Steve Vai at the National Guitar Workshop in LA, which was really cool. I was rehearsing with my ensemble and he was doing a clinic that day, and so I see his rig on the ground, and I see Thomas Nordic, his guitar tech, and I'm like, well, hey, you're Thomas Nordic, what's up? And he's like, yeah, I'm like, where's Steve? And he's like, oh, I think he's out running errands. So I started playing. And we were actually doing Black Star by Yngwie. And so there's no one in the auditorium. I look up and I just sort of see Steve Vai just like, you know, very calm and serene. And I'm like, oh my God. And I just kind of panicked a little bit and maybe sort of like turned to the side and sort of play. And by the time we finished, he had left. And later on, he was doing a Q&A session for his seminar. And I asked a question about modes and stuff like that, and I don't even know if he even remembered me, like could pick me out the crowd, but he actually stopped and said, well, first of all, what's your name? John. You know, he's like, everyone here, he's like, John was kicking some ass earlier with his ensemble. And I'm like, holy shit, you know.
That is something.
That was wow, that was probably the coolest thing at the time. That was a great experience. And I shook his hand later and I met him afterwards, and he was a really nice guy. And then now I'm getting more into like the jazz guys. Started out with like Django Reinhardt,
sure.
Joe Pass, Wes Montgomery, George Benson, and a little bit of Coltrane, Charlie Parker, and stuff like that. And I think for anyone who's exploring an instrument, they're always sort of pushing themselves technically and also melodically and harmonically too, which is one thing that the jazz explores a lot, is harmony. And that's at this point, my playing, that's something that I would want to explore. Also, is it's more on the harmonic side of things, and like just a lot of different ideas that aren't necessarily applied as much in metal. That it maybe I would like to see other people do, because it's really cool. I know Doth does that. Emil Wurzler listens to a lot of like gypsy metal or gypsy jazz, sorry, and he definitely employs that, and it sounds awesome. So those are my some.
Now, what kind of guitar do you play?
And I play right now. I have a Jackson R5, which I did for the first record, and which I use on the road. And then for the second album, I actually used a Gibson Les Paul for most of it. And I think you can sort of hear it too, because I kind of went for kind of like an Eric Johnson sound, and obviously nowhere near his playing, but there was a lot of mid range in there, and a lot of the treble was taken out, I think, because I wanted a really smoother sound for the sort of the atmosphere for the music.
Now, I understand you guys are going to come back through sometime toward the fall, play some festivals in Europe, and then come back across.
Mm-hmm. Right now, I think Kev's working on some dates for mid to late August, and we're not too clear on the specific dates or even specific venues, but we're definitely going to be coming up. Just to check out the new album, Examination of Being. It'll be out May 4th in the States, and I think April 26th in Europe. And also, I actually have a side project called Mandragora that I will now shamelessly plug. It's spelled M-A-N-D-R-A, Mandra, and then Gora, G-O-R-A, and it's sort of like a melodic death metal thing that I think you'll really dig. And it's just myspace.com/Mandragora. So those two things I will urge you to check out.
Great.